Hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today I want to tell you about a garage sale that I had this last weekend, Memorial Day weekend, with my mother, St. Rita, as people call her. She's 98 years old, and she just loves doing garage sales, and she's been an antique dealer most of her adult life. And she just loves haggling with people and talking about the history of things and what old things are that we were selling. And I had quite a collection of things in my home that it was just time to let go of. A lot of things I'd collected as over my career as an auctioneer and just, a collector of things. So it was time to let stuff go. And I had a lot of things in the home, and she had a lot of things that she wanted to go through. So anyone who's been involved in a garage sale knows that there's high traffic times, and then there's a lot of lulls where nobody's there. And so what this allowed me was a lot of alone time with my mother to talk about certain things. And she's really sharp, has a great sense of humor, and a real strong grasp of facts and history and things that she's lived through. And so I wanted to explore these things as I was sitting there with her. So I would fire off certain questions to her, and she would answer in the back, some of them about my father, her brothers and sisters, and growing up in the small town of Decatur, Indiana, when she, back in the 1930s and 40s, and how that was. And it was very enlightening for me. And one of the things we touched upon was the ramp up to World War II. Now, in 1939, 1940, my mother was 14 years old, and my father was a year behind her. He was 13. And as these young people that were coming of age at that time, I asked her, I said, what did the war build up, and World War II, what did that feel like to a young person at that time? What was your thinking? What was your fears? What were your confident points? What did you know? What didn't you know? These types of things. How did they feel about what was going on? And she replied that it was basically something that they had never themselves been a part of. And so it was all new, but they knew that it was very, very important. And it was a call for everyone in the country, not just certain types, but everyone had to add into this pile of resources and energy and determination in order to win this, because they had this strong opposition coming at them, and this was the real threat to democracy that as she saw it, because they were trying to take people's votes away in other countries, and they thought for certain if the United States didn't stand up with the Europeans, that it would just be a house of cards after that. So this was the realization even that the kids had at that time. And so, but they weren't able to do anything physically to add to it. They could collect medals and things like this, and they could try to add to the, what do we call it, the war machine, the buildup at that time. And so they did the best that they could with what they had as kids. They had rationing, so sugar and other supplies and things like that were naturally off the store shelves, and they could get some of it, but not enough of it to make it a permanent part of their diet plan and things like that. So they measured it out, and they were very, very careful about what they consumed. She said they never went hungry, they never went cold. Her pop did a great job of keeping things going then, and she had older brothers that were moving off to war. Some were enlisted, some were drafted, and they all did service, and they all went, and they fortunately for her, they all came home. But in that time, when it got to be, I think 1944 or 45, I forget which year, my father enlisted. He was underage. He lied about his age. I don't know if he forged his mother's signature to get in, but it was a common thing for young men to do at that time. My father had graduated high school, and he decided to enlist in the Navy. And the reason he chose the Navy, he said, well, if the boat went down, he wasn't going to be hurt or injured. He would die, and then there wouldn't be a lifetime of misery coming his way. So this was his choice. This was his thought process, and a lot of young men felt that way. They didn't. The thing that they worried about the most was not dying. It was about being injured and having a lifetime of problematic living going with that. They didn't want to endure in that. They weren't afraid of the prospect of dying. They were afraid of the prospect of being injured and being damaged forever. So this is the mindset that a lot of these folks were going at that time. And it was very, very illuminating to me to think that somebody would rather, at that age, accept a certain death than to come back and live with either amputations or other physical afflictions, head injuries, and things like this that were going to be a constant problem the rest of their lives. So that's a self-determining philosophy, and that I can accept that because, like I say, we all dig our own graves in this world. Some of us just have larger shovels. We get there a little bit faster. So with thinking about what she was saying, and she said, we just did what we had to do. It wasn't something you really had to think about. It was something that everyone agreed with. We've got to do this. And that got me thinking, about the spirit of our society now and what is going on, and what are people willing to pay in the form of a price to succeed and to endure and to continue their culture and the values that they have accepted and tried to live by. How far will you go to defend that or to support it? And a lot of people want to talk about heroic virtue, and I've had people try to throw my way that I've had heroic virtue in this saving this devotion several times and keeping it from the dustbin of the thoughts and prayers of our community, whether it be Catholic or just the world at large. And it brought to mind a guy who's always been a model for me in thought and process, and that's this guy here. And his name is Leonidas, Leonidas. And Leonidas, at one time, grew into being the king of Sparta. And I think it was about somewhere in the 400s BC that Leonidas became the king of Sparta after two of his older brothers, I think, had been taken off the throne or committed suicide or whatever had happened at that time. Well, Leonidas took the throne, and Leonidas was a Spartan warrior. And he had grown up in the Spartan camps, the schools, the training. And when it came time for Leonidas to take on the Persian armies, he chose the port area of Thermopylae outside of Sparta. And it had a coastal area, and it had a pretty tight little horseshoe, kind of like Ohio State Stadium. If anyone's ever gone to a football game there or seen it, it's kind of like a horseshoe, and it came back around. So it was a tight choke point coming into it. And so what he wanted to do was to set up a defensive position. So he built walls around the harbor area there, the shoreline there at Thermopylae, so that the Persians would have a difficult time trying to get up the hill and into the landmass there. And Leonidas chose 300 men. And they were hand-picked men, and he chose 300 because that was a reasonable amount of men to be able to command in such a tight space. He thought if he had too many, it had gotten to be too gangly and unwieldy to be able to be directed in the throes of battle. So out of those 300 men that he picked, they were all hand-picked, and they all had to be between the ages of 20 and 29, because the Spartans would group their soldiers in 10-year age groups. And they always wanted to make sure that they were like-minded in their associations and their aging and their development. But he chose the 20 to 29-year-olds, and out of those 20 to 29-year-olds, besides being special soldiers, they all had to have a son as an heir. They already had to have a birth son at home. This way that these men who were being chosen for basically a certain death would have someone to carry on their name and legacy back in Sparta. So with those two preconditions of the age and capability of these soldiers, they're all pretty well trained, but they all had to have a survivor, a son, to carry on. And that's how much that Leonidas valued that in the sustaining and moving on to try to maintain the culture. And he wanted to make sure there were sons around later on to avenge their father's death or to understand why their fathers did die. So there was honor all throughout this. And so Leonidas fought, and there was a lot of bloodshed happened. But you would think that with the Persians coming in with nearly 50,000 soldiers, that the 300 Spartans would be wiped out very quickly. That's not what happened. They said at one time there were upwards of 30,000 bodies stacked up and rotting with the flies. The stench, they said, was so overpowering that most men and even the beasts would want to run from it and not stay there to have to manage the power of the stench that was coming over. It was all too consuming. It was retching. And to imagine the situation with that is just unbelievable. But this is what they went through. But Leonidas and his men stood up in the face of overwhelming numbers against them. And in a way, although defeated and all killed, they were very, very successful. And so there's certain times that men and women, people need to stand up when the time comes upon them, and they need to not fear their death, but accept their death as part of their life. And one of the things that happened with Leonidas and their camp that they were getting together, there was like 4 days or so before the Persians actually started an attack. And in that 4 days, the Persians had sent out spies, and some of them were people from Sparta that they had turned over because these folks thought that, hey, Spartan's over, may as well join the Persians here and live on and maybe get a good job with them. They were kind of like Michael Cohen's. And what the spies saw and reported back to the generals and the leaders and the king there of Persia was that these guys, the Spartans, were sitting there. They were braiding each other's hair. They were dancing. They were celebrating. They were doing all these things that the king of Persia couldn't understand. He says, well, they must be out of their minds. And the spies told them, he says, well, I can assure you, these men are not crazy. They are ready. And you need to be ready because these guys are ready to, fight. And they are not afraid to die. And that's a really tough thing to beat when you have somebody that's not afraid to die. And that's kind of what we have going on in our world today with certain extremists in different ideologies around the world. They are ready to deliver upon their promises of annihilation of other races and other states and other people who think certain ways. They're ready to kill and die in exchange for that. They have made a ready pact with that. And we've seen that with what has happened against Israel as of late. To apply Western thinking to what these other folks are doing is totally mind-blowing because they're not playing by the same set of rules or guidelines. That's what Leonidas did, and that's what blew the mind of the Persian king. And even the oracle of Apollo, which the Greeks regarded as being the voice of the gods, had told all these city-states to lay down because they could not defend and they couldn't defeat the Persians. The Persians would be way too strong. And the oracle of Apollo had advised them all to, capitulate and give in. And Leonidas and others said, screw you, we're not doing that. and it doesn't seem right. It's not in us. And so they took their heroic virtue to the mat, and they lived by it and they died by it. But the thing is that they didn't live in fear of death. And I think that's what we got going on right now in this world right now, is we have too many people afraid of death and the bargain that they made and the agreement that was made by their nature of actually being born. So, Jesus healed a lot of people, and the scriptures tell us so, and our hearts believe it, and we understand that Jesus had the power, just by his own thought and intention, to heal on demand. And we hear about all these things where Jesus would, spit on the ground and make mud and spread it on the blind man's eyes, to restore his sight. Jesus didn't need to spit on the ground, make mud, or do any of that. He could have just said, see. Let your sight be restored. I command that your sight be restored. He just had to say the word. Just like the one soldier had said to Jesus, I'm not worthy that you should enter into my house, but say the word, my servant shall be healed. That was true faith. That was true belief in what was going on with the presence of, God made man right here on earth. Jesus didn't need these things to do his work, but people needed to see some sort of vehicle to believe that there was some sort of causal thing between this, that, and that. And so Jesus understood that, and so he used things like that, little devices to show his capacity and his ability to heal. Now, Jesus healed a lot of people. He rose Lazarus from the dead. But one thing all these people that had gotten healed have in common is they all died. They all died. But they died to their physical death, but their spiritual life endured. And so the one thing they all got was salvation in that moment then too. So that was the better value. That was the real prize. And I think that people in that moment were so happy about having their lives restored and their physical ailments taken away, their sins forgiven, like the woman who's going to be stoned. These are things that are of much higher value and much more importance in our world and in our lives. And we need to maintain that. And we need to understand that. And we need to appreciate our physical existence, but we also need to realize that it's temporary. This is just the first part of a long, long life. And so keeping that in mind, I want to tell you about a couple of guys that came to the property several years ago. I was there working, and over the course of my years, I'd always had people showing up, without any appointment. They'd just show up and say that God told them to come there, and that Larry would know what to do, not knowing that they were talking to Larry, the only Larry in town, pretty much, and or at least the only Larry there. And these two guys came in, wonderful brothers, and they'd come in. I think they'd come in from the Pittsburgh area, and they had a story, and they had a lot of concerns, and they were coming seeking physical healing. And they had heard about Rome City and the property and the aspects of people having been received healings before, and they wanted the same for them. They had cancer a few years back, and his cancer was apparently in remediation, or they'd come upon a cure, I guess, or at least he wasn't showing symptoms of the cancer anymore. Well, in the meantime, his other brother had gotten a recent diagnosis of cancer. And so these two brothers hopped in the car and they drove to Rome City. And they got there and they came seeking healing, and they were just really, really scared. And they were really fearful of a possible impending death sentence for not just one, but for both of them. These guys were running scared. And so I took them around, showed them around, told them about some of the things that had happened before. And then I told the guys, I said, I think they wanted me to pray over them. And I said, well, I think what we need to do is I need to take you out to Holy Family Hill. And so I got them in the golf cart, and we went out to Holy Family Hill, and we're out there, and I'm getting ready to pray over these guys, and then they just start kind of breaking down and crying and worrying about, they're dying. And these guys were like 50 to maybe 55 years old at best. And I was looking at them, and these guys were more fearful, and they hadn't said anything about the needs of others around them. It was all about them and their fear of dying, which I understand. I don't want to die either. I got too much stuff to do. And that's what these guys were feeling. And so they start crying, that they, need to live. They're not ready to die, all this stuff. And I just remembered back to my older brother. I called him Peanut. His name was Frank, same as my father. So in order to alleviate confusion in the family, we just called my older brother by his nickname, which was Peanut. And when Peanut died, he died at the age of 52. So he was about the age of these guys. He'd had lifelong diabetes, and it had taken its toll on him. And he lived a lot longer than the doctors anticipated. They didn't expect him to get out of his 30s, but he got into his early 50s. And I stayed with my brother in the hospital at University of Michigan Hospital pretty much the last 2.5 months of his life. He'd gone into intensive care, and I went and I stayed with him each day and would assist him through the day, help the nurses do their work with him, help keep his bed changed, help move him. And I was there to try to help coach him and to get him through the tough stuff. And we had a lot of talks together, and it was just really, really inspirational to watch this man go through the ordeals of the pain and what they had to do to him just to sometimes even find a good blood vessels or veins in order for them to run IV lines into. And so his physical condition had deteriorated so much they couldn't find veins to run IVs into. So they had to do what they called a cut down. And a cut down is where they cut into your skin and expose everything so they can get in and actually see something. And it's a very, very painful process, but it was something that he dealt with. And it struck me, I was in the room with him through this to kind of give him moral support and, we're in this together, bro. And amazingly, when these people would come in and basically butcher him right in front of himself, when they were all done, he would look them in the eye and say, "Thank you. I really appreciate you." And this was stunning to these technicians, these, sub-surgeons, if you will, that were doing their work. And they felt so bad about what they were doing. And then here's this man directly after that saying, "Thank you," because he knew it was hard for them to do it too. But they were doing their job. They were doing what needed to be done. And he was accepting what needed to be done because it was the only way that he could have any potential to fulfill his goal. And I'd ask him, "What is your goal in this? Why are we working so damn hard? Why are you putting up with so much suffering?" He says, "I have children, and I need to be able to go home so I can be with my kids." Now, his oldest daughter was at Boston College at this time. She was doing well with her university studies, and she was playing women's field hockey when there was just women on the field, no trans. And my nephew, his son, I believe was, I don't know if he was a junior in high school at that time. I don't know if he's a senior or junior, but anyway, he was in high school. And my brother's only concern was to be able to get home so he could help those kids. And so I said, why are we fighting? He says, it's for the kids. I got to be able to get home. And I said, all right, let's go. We're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of missing out with the kids and the kids not having their father there. So I was all in at that point. And my brother ended up passing away, and I had the kids there in time to all say goodbye. And, it was just one of those lifelong experiences that I'm never going to forget, was that was heroic virtue right then. And these guys had it. My brother showed it, taught a lot to the staff up there, and pretty amazing journey there. So I have these two guys there are sitting there crying about dying. And it kind of came back about what had happened with my brother, a decade or so earlier, if not longer, maybe 15 years. And it all came flooding back to me, what happened at that time. And I just looked at these two guys and said, you guys are two big pussies. And they just looked at me like I just shot them in the head. And I kind of did. I had to stun them a little bit. And they were just shocked that they had come for this. And here I'm sitting there calling them a couple of pussies. And I said, what makes you so damn special? What makes you think that you have the right and the ability to live forever? I said, we all die. And I said, do you have kids? And the one says, yeah, I got 5. I said, do you have kids? He goes, yeah, I got 4. And I said, you're two big pussies right now. I said, you're sitting there worried about dying and living in fear when you got kids at home that what they need is their dad. And what you need to do is to go back and show them not what it's like to be living with sickness, but how to live with living and showing them what it means to live. Why are you going to sit there and live life in fear? What are you training your kids to? They're just going to, after you die, which is natural and is inevitable for all of us. I'm not saying you're going to die now, but someday you will. But if you train these kids to be in fear and to sit there and complain about the inevitable, what kind of strength are they going to have going forward? Everything you did with them as a child is going to be dismissed because you were afraid. They both just looked at me and looked at each other and they go, holy crap. Why didn't we understand that? I said, you have kids. As soon as you took those kids in the world, your reason for living changed immediately. You became a dad. And these two guys at that moment, they got it. And I told them, I said, I'm not trying to, make fun of you. I'm trying to shock you back into reality and let you know what it is you're supposed to do. Well, these two guys just looked at each other, hugged it out, hugged with me, and they just started laughing. And they laughed, I think, the whole rest of the day, and they probably laughed the whole way back to Pittsburgh. And I'll guarantee you, I bet they were crying and moaning and worried the whole way there, but they were not worried and crying or anything the whole way back. And how do I know this? Well, the next week, another carload of people showed up from Pittsburgh. And this is other family members. And they came and they wanted to say thank you. And I said, what for? He says, you gave us our brothers back. They came here, they were afraid. Now they're back. And man, these guys are on fire. They are like happy. They are, excited. And everyone around was just like, how can you be so excited? They says, we're not dead yet. We're going to live until we die. And so these two brothers went back there, and as far as I know, nothing has changed. These guys are living. They might be going through crap with maybe chemo and stuff like that. But I think that their attitude changed in that. And that's why I say when people come to Rome City, I would tell them, don't come and expect anything, but take what you're given, because everybody gets something. Now, these guys didn't get an instant miracle. They didn't get an instant healing. But what they did get was an instant spiritual healing. And they were able to focus back on, to leave their physical behind, and they were focusing more on their spiritual aspects and their role as fathers and leaders of these other children that they had. Do is instill confidence in the rest of the family unit. And apparently they went back and says, we did not recognize our brothers when they came back. And so we were so stunned by that that we felt that we had to come here. And they all had their little issues, and I talked to them about that. And I don't know when I became a psychotherapist with these folks, but a lot of times I would just tell them, you know, I think what they were afraid to look in the mirror and see. And a lot of times it's just uncanny how it would come out of me. But, for all the work and all the suffering that's gone on here, I'm not going to go down for a lie. I'm not going to let people lie about me or the people around us or any of the other things that have gone on here. If they're going to lie about it, I'm going to dismiss it and I'm going to move on. And a lot of people do that. But what it is, it's their own insecurities and their own, lack of surety about things. And a lot of times this happens with religious people that come through because they say, well, there's no proof on it. The church hasn't approved it. I said, but the people have. And the commitment is there, and the other folks who will tell you what has happened to them, that's the proof that you need, not to prove it to some academic someplace, who's going to sit there and judge things by what the diaries of Sister Millie had to say or these other things, then count down. They want to exclude all this because of one particular element. And the biggest problem that they had when they were telling me, this is the theologians, is that naming St. Joseph as a co-redemptor. And they're saying St. Joseph doesn't heal anybody. I said, no, and neither does Mary. And Mary is known as a co-redemptrix. But no one's saying that Mary heals anybody. Mary calls you, says, come to me, your mother, and I will love you and hold you. And I'm going to introduce you to someone real important in your life, and that's my son, Jesus. That's what all of this is about. It's not about any adoration of the Blessed Mother. It's thanking her for doing what needed to be done at that time. We are thanking St. Joseph for doing what needed to be done at that time and introducing us to their son, that being Jesus. So when people come through here and they don't understand what the true focus is, a lot of times it comes back on themselves because that's where their concern is. It's all about me, 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 me. And I don't know how many people I've told over the course of the years, it's never been about you. It's always about him with a capital H. And a lot of times people are offended by that. Says, well, I matter too. I said, yes, you do. You matter in how you echo what he had to say and asked of you. This is our job. This is our duty. This is our call to be like Leonidas. I'm sorry, I'm having a Joe Biden moment. But Leonidas knew what his role was. He knew what he had to do. And he was not afraid of joining, the spirits in heaven, that being whatever heaven he saw as his afterlife. But they had a strong belief in an afterlife. They probably would have made awesome Catholics had they had the ability to know about that. So, or Christians in general. I mean, I'm not saying everyone has to be Catholic, and that's the beauty about this, is the fight goes on, and we need to be strong. The fight's going to get really bad. It's already amping up right now. If you haven't seen the news with Harrison Butker and the division that's happening in the ranks around, even amongst Catholics, Catholics are saying it was so offensive and so, attacking and things like that. But I don't think they really listen to the whole thing. They say, well, to attack or say anything bad about the priests and the bishops, oh, that's all wrong. No, it's our job. It's our job to call this stuff out, to make sure that they're doing the work that they're supposed to be doing, that they are like Leonidas. But so often they get so comfortable and they're so afraid and they're not doing everything that they probably should be doing at the time because they find, well, I'm tired, or there's not enough time in the day, or these other things. You have to find the time You have to know that you have to make a stand sometimes, and the truth is the truth. And it's never been about you. It's always been about him. So the continuity of thought and thinking started off with my mother talking about people standing up and taking sufferings and taking extra effort to help with the war effort. Young people going in and lying about their age to be able to go and serve because it was the right thing to do, and they were going to feel bad if they had to wait for a certain calendar date to be able to join in. They were, in a specific hurry or set of urgency to get in and take care of this before more people got hurt. And we are losing that in our society with the softness that's come in. And I'm not saying everyone needs to line up to go, die in a war or anything like that. But you do need to be willing to serve. And we need to get more people into service and doing the things that need to be done. Because without that, we're not going to end up being ready to do anything. We won't be able to even take care of ourselves. So we need to be thinking about that. We need to keep our eye on the prize, which is the spiritual healings and the life in heaven, hopefully awaiting us if we make ourselves ready through it with the divine indwelling of the Holy Trinity. I know I'm working on it. I fail every day, but it's there for us. So take pride in your life. Honor your impending death, if that's what's coming. Embrace it all. Embrace it all. Live a fulfilling life. Live a life with purity. And that's what this is all about, is sometimes purity means getting dirty. Because there's a lot to clean up. So I hope everyone takes the time today. This is Memorial Day 2024. Take a little time in your day. I know we're supposed to do the whole thing, but be sincere about it. Take a few moments. Thank your fathers and forefathers who helped deliver safety and security in this world. Because right now we need that same inspiration and thought process again. Because I got to tell you, it's going to get dirty. And you need to be ready to help deliver purity by helping to clean it up. And the only way you can clean it up is by saying no, walking away, and using the strength of your position to deliver feather strokes. Now, feather strokes doesn't mean being passive and sitting down. It means being strong in your determination to deliver the things that need to be in place for us to have the stability in this country so that purity can be echoed. So, a lot to take in. Hopefully you got that. If any questions, please, write it down on the email there, send it to me, or write in the comments section below here. Please, if you like what I'm doing here, subscribe, share it, and like it, because all these metrics mean something here with YouTube. And I'm right on the cusp of being able to go to the next level with these programs here. So please help me out with that. And in the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.